The ancient text known as Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is a definitive, highly complex algorithmic manual designed to completely dismantle human cognitive turbulence. Compiled around 400 CE, it acts as a precise schematic for reverse engineering human consciousness. To understand how this system runs, we will look at one specific physical blueprint, the 1904 Anandashrama Sanskrit edition, published in Pune, India. A sutra literally translates to a thread. In practice, it is a hyper-compressed aphorism. Because of this extreme brevity, a sutra is virtually undecipherable on its own. Operating this code required an intensive, intimate human transmission. An oral and hermeneutic teaching tradition was the only way to unpack and actualize the text. Patanjali provides the system's core logic. The historical commentators provide the specialized knowledge required to navigate it. This 1904 edition synthesizes three distinct layers of historical commentary into a single volume, centered on Patanjali's original sutras. The first layer is Vyasabhashya, written in the 5th century, providing the foundational definitions and Sankhya metaphysical bedrock. Vyasa takes Patanjali's brief psychological instructions and connects them to a much wider cosmological framework of matter and consciousness. The second layer is Vachaspati Misra's Tattvavaisharadi from the 9th century. This acts as a rigorous epistemological defense of the system. Vachaspati's job was to defend Vyasa's logic against intense academic attacks from rival philosophical schools. The third layer is Bojadeva's Rajamartanda, compiled in the 11th century. This operates as a streamlined manual. Bojadeva stripped away the heavy academic debates of his predecessors to focus directly on the practitioner's internal, pragmatic experience. Together, these layers form a complete structural stack. Vyasa provides the foundational logic, Vachaspati secures the reasoning, and Boja handles the practical application. The architecture of the sutras is divided into 4 quadrants. The first is Samadhipada. This opening chapter is aimed strictly at practitioners who already possess highly stable minds. It defines the endpoint before introducing any practices. It opens with Patanjali's foundational axiom, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha. This diagram represents Chitta, the mind field, and Vritti, the continuous, chaotic fluctuations of that field. Left to itself, human consciousness is a state of perpetual turbulence. Nirodha is the absolute cessation and flattening of those fluctuations. The first stage of this flattened state is sampragnata. Here, the mind achieves deep absorption by locking on to a single specific object. The advanced stage is asampragnata. In this state, the mind maintains absolute absorption without any object at all. Chapter 1 acts as the master blueprint. It dictates the exact engineering tolerances of the final target state, before any tools are even picked up. The second quadrant is Sadhana Pada. This chapter is designed specifically for the Vyuthita Chitta, the distracted ordinary mind. It introduces the kleshas. These are the 5 cognitive afflictions that cause all human suffering and mental turbulence. This hierarchical flowchart shows how all kleshas stem from one root source, avidya, or the fundamental ignorance of our true identity. From avidya, the corruption cascades downward into the other 4 afflictions: ego, attachment, aversion, and the clinging fear of death. To weaken these cognitive distortions, Patanjali introduces Kriya Yoga as the primary intervention tool. Kriya Yoga relies on 3 active components: intense discipline, rigorous self-study, and psychological surrender. This chapter also outlines the first 5 outer limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, which are used to regulate external behavior and physiological states. In Patanjali's system, physical postures and behavioral ethics are not the final goal. They are strictly prerequisites required to build a stable platform for deeper cognitive intervention. The third quadrant is Vibhuti-pada. Here, the system moves completely away from the body and entirely into the architecture of the mind. It details the 3 inner limbs, dharana, which is concentration, dhyana, meditation, and samadhi, complete integration. When these 3 inner limbs are applied simultaneously on a single focal point, the process is called samyama. Executing samyama produces siddhis or vibhutis. These are extraordinary perceptual and physical powers that emerge naturally as side effects of intense concentration. Historically, practitioners have focused heavily on these powers, which range from physical invisibility to the absolute knowledge of past lives. In Sutra 3.37, the system reaches a sudden boundary. Patanjali explicitly warns that these powers, the very result of the practice, must be abandoned. While these abilities appear as perfections to the worldly mind, the text treats them as massive obstacles to true liberation. Indulging in cognitive superpowers traps the user back in the matrix of ego and matter, defeating the entire purpose of the system. The final quadrant is Kaivalyapada, the ontological endgame. This chapter outlines the mechanical resolution of karma, reaching a state where the practitioner's actions no longer produce future psychological tethering. It details the complete erasure of vasanas. Vasanas are the deep subconscious impressions and habitual grooves that normally dictate human behavior. This process crosses its ultimate threshold in Dharma Mega Samadhi, the cloud of virtue. This state washes away the absolute last microscopic traces of cognitive affliction. What remains is Kaivalya. This is the final state where the seer, or Purusha, rests entirely in its own true nature. In Kaivalya, pure consciousness is definitively and permanently decoupled from the mechanisms of both matter and the mind. Kaivalya is a state of absolute, autonomous psychological singularity, achieved and maintained in the present moment. These 4 chapters function as a complete, closed-loop algorithmic pathway. Step 1 sets the target tolerance, defining the exact parameters of a perfectly still mind. Step 2 diagnoses the internal bugs and applies the initial behavioral tools to stabilize the hardware. Step 3 drives focus inward while requiring the user to bypass the emergent obstacles of power. Step 4 executes the final freedom protocol, isolating pure awareness. The 19 sutras represent the system's logic, but it is the work of Vyasa, Vachaspati, and Bhoja that makes the architecture operational for the practitioner. In classical Indian literature, there is a tradition known as the Phala Stuti, the formal recitation of the ultimate result of studying a sacred text. We find this summation at the very end of the 1904 edition, in Vachaspati Misra's closing words. Vachaspati asserts that by traversing this exact architecture, the human mind is systematically made fit for absolute liberation. The final result is the total separation of the 3 gunas, the fundamental qualities of nature, from pure awareness. He captures this in a specific, poetic Sanskrit phrase, Pari Galita Tapa Chitira So. This translates to, an awareness from which all afflictions have completely melted away. The Yoga Sutras culminate in an indestructible, frictionless state of pure awareness.